Welcome to the Deep Dives. Today, we're getting into something that sounds maybe a bit corporate at first. Accountability, responsibility, and trust.
Right. Buzzwords, almost.
Exactly. But stick with us because our source here, Chapter 15 of Professional Generalism, it offers this really, well, surprisingly useful way to look at them through this lens of energy management.
Which sounds a bit strange, maybe. But energy here is super broad.
Yeah, not just like your power bill. It's basically any resource, any task, anything you handle or are entrusted with, material stuff, immaterial stuff, duties, you name it.
Yep. And our goal today, our mission for this deep dive, is really to pull out the key insights from this chapter for you, the listener.
So you can kind of quickly get a handle on these ideas. Accountability, responsibility, trust, see how they're all connected and how they pop up everywhere in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what grabs you straight away in the chapter is this point that, accountability and responsibility, they're not just for when things go wrong at the office.
Right, not just blame assignment.
Not at all. The chapter argues they're, fundamental. Anytime you're managing any kind of energy, your own time, maybe shared office supplies, something someone lent you.
You can't really avoid them.
You can't sidestep them, no.
Yeah.
Even if you ignore your responsibilities, that act of ignoring, it still affects how that energy is used or misused. They don't just disappear.
Okay, so we're all managing this energy all the time. But how do we know what we're actually accountable for or what our responsibilities even are?
That's where the idea of codes comes in.
Ah.
It's a key concept in the chapter.
Codes. Okay, tell us about that. What are they?
So think of codes as the underlying rule books. Sometimes they're explicit, like written down laws, contracts, company policies.
Yeah.
But often they're unwritten. Just, social conventions, agreements, expectations within a group or relationship.
Like the rules of borrowing a book from a friend.
Exactly. Or how you share a kitchen space with roommates.
Yeah.
These codes, written or not, they basically define who possesses what, who trusts whom with specific things.
And they lay out the who, when, why, where, what, and how of managing that energy, the 5W and H.
Precisely. They spell out the 5W and H. And the chapter points out that societal trust, just that general baseline expectation that people will behave certain ways, is kind of the ultimate code.
Right, if that breaks down.
If that breaks down, even detailed written contracts become, pretty hard to enforce, don't they?
Makes sense. So owning my phone, that's property rights, a clear code. Organizing a team lunch, maybe less formal codes. Expectations about ordering, budget, timing.
Perfect examples.
Yeah.
And these codes give us a relatively stable ground for understanding what's expected. So now, how does accountability fit into this picture with the codes and the energy?
Yeah, accountability. What's the chapter's definition there?
Accountability basically is being answerable. Answerable to whoever allows you or trusts you to manage that energy, whether you possess it or it's entrusted.
So you need to report back, essentially. Keep them informed about the 5WH, how you used it, when, why.
Exactly, informing them. The chapter gives a really good, relatable example.
Right.
Renting a car.
Ah, the rental car. Okay. So if I rent a car, I'm accountable to the rental company. I have to use it according to their rules, the rental agreement, that's the code.
Yep. But it's not just a one-way street, is it? That's a key point.
No, right. It goes in multiple directions.
Absolutely. It's cyclical, the rental company. They're also accountable. Accountable, say, to regulatory bodies for the car's safety.
Uh-huh. For maintenance and stuff?
Right. And think about it if accountability breaks down somewhere. Like if the company cuts corners on safety.
It erodes trust everywhere else. Maybe the employees don't follow procedures as carefully then, or the customers lose faith.
Exactly. So you have, the government setting safety standards. They're accountable to the public. The company is accountable to the government. The driver is accountable to the company.
And also accountable to the public, to society, for driving safely according to traffic laws. Wow, okay, that's a whole web.
It is. A web of answerability. And the chapter really stresses that the trust from society, just the general trust that drivers will mostly follow the rules, is what makes the whole system work.
That baseline trust allows people like me to even rent a car and use the rides in the first place.
Got it. Okay, so that's accountability, being answerable. Now, responsibility. The chapter calls it the other side of the coin.
That's the framing.
Yeah.
If accountability is being answerable to those who trust us with energy, then responsibility is our obligation to those who receive or are affected by the energy we transmit or manage.
Okay, so obligation to others. Let's use the rental car again.
Okay. So the company's responsible for providing a safe, working car and for clearly explaining the rules. That's the energy, the service they're providing to the renter.
Right. And me, The driver, I'm responsible to other drivers, pedestrians, everyone on the road for using that car safely, following the laws.
Exactly. Your responsible actions or irresponsible ones directly impact the energy, the safety, the flow for everyone else sharing that space.
Like the road is a shared pool of energy, and my driving affects the quality of that pool for everyone. That's a great way to put it. And responsibility, like accountability, it's also kind of cyclical or mutual.
Yeah.
We all have some responsibility, arguably, to contribute to making the codes themselves work well, to make sure they're fair and effective.
That links into something else the chapter mentioned, awareness. How
Okay.
does actually knowing our responsibilities connect to being accountable?
Yeah, that's a really interesting link they draw. It's direct. The chapter says basically, if you're not even aware of your responsibilities,
Yeah.
if you don't know the expected 5W and H for the energy you're handling,
Yeah.
then you essentially have no accounts to tell. You can't give a meaningful explanation.
Even if technically you are accountable.
Right. You might be accountable on paper, but if you didn't know what you were supposed to be doing, how can you explain your actions properly? It's like being quizzed on a subject you didn't know was on the test.
Okay. So really being accountable, giving that valid, reliable explanation, it hinges on first understanding and acting on your responsibilities.
Precisely. You need awareness first. And this leads nicely into another distinction the chapter makes. Looking back versus looking forward.
Retrospective versus prospective accountability.
Exactly.
So, retrospective. That sounds like looking back after something happened, like a post-mortem.
Yeah. You're explaining things after the fact, assessing actions against the codes, figuring out where responsibilities maybe weren't met. It's like realizing you blew your budget after you get the credit card statement.
Okay, the look back. But the chapter seemed to really emphasize the value of being aware beforehand. That's prospective accountability.
Yes, that's the proactive side. If you're aware of your responsibilities up front, you can engage with them differently.
So what does that look like? Instead of explaining later, you...
Well, the text mentions things like asking for clarification on the rules before you start, or giving feedback on whether the rules actually make sense or are practical.
So engaging with the codes and responsibilities, maybe asking for the resources you need to actually meet those responsibilities properly.
Exactly. It's about shaping things from the outset, not just reacting afterwards. It feels much more, well, powerful, doesn't it? Trying to ensure things go right, rather than just explaining why they went wrong.
Definitely more constructive. Now, what about when things get messy? Like teams or shared stuff? Individual versus collective responsibility. How does the chapter handle that?
Yeah, that can be tricky territory. The core idea presented is that even when you're part of a collective sharing resources, working towards a common goal, being collectively accountable for the outcome, you still retain individual accountability and responsibility for the specific slice of energy that you manage within that collective, according to the agreed objectives and the 5W and H for your part.
Okay, so the shared office space example they used helps here. We're all collectively responsible for keeping it tidy, maybe?
Yeah, collective responsibility for the overall environment.
But I'm still individually responsible for cleaning my own coffee mug or not leaving my mess everywhere. My individual actions contribute to or detract from the collective state.
Precisely. Your individual energy management adds up. And the chapter adds another layer. It says, even if you follow the rules for your part, you might still be held accountable if the wider consequences of your actions negatively impact others unexpectedly.
Oof. So, ripple effects.
Yeah.
Thinking beyond just my immediate task.
Yeah, it's a reminder that responsibilities can extend outwards. Of course, you can't monitor everything all the time.
That sounds exhausting.
It would be. And that's where, again, trust comes back in. The text highlights how much society runs on mutual trust.
The expectation that other people will also manage their energy responsibly, that they won't deliberately mess things up for you.
Exactly. It's that assumption, that trust that allows us to function without constantly checking up on everyone about everything.
Which then leads to these two interesting roles the chapter suggests we can play. The responsibility reminder and the accountability guardian. What are those about?
Yeah, these are quite active roles. Being a responsibility reminder is about, well, gently helping others remember or be aware of their responsibilities.
Gently. So, not nagging.
No, definitely not nagging. It's framed as supportive, like maybe checking in with a teammate. Hey, just wondering how that part of the project is coming along. It's about facilitating success, keeping things on track collaboratively.
Okay, like a helpful nudge. And the accountability guardian, that sounds a bit more serious.
It is, perhaps. It's about being willing to hold others accountable, to raise concerns when you see intentional mismanagement or, neglect of responsibilities.
So stepping up when someone is deliberately breaking the codes or ignoring their duties.
Yes, it's about ensuring there are actually consequences for those deliberate breaches to maintain the integrity of the system, the codes, and the trust. It's not about minor mistakes, but intentional acts or clear negligence.
Those are pretty powerful concepts, acting as reminders and guardians. Seems vital for keeping things working based on everything we've discussed. So wrapping up, the chapter had some key reflections and actions.
It did. The reflections kind of summarize our chat. Accountability is often retrospective, focused on transparency, explaining the past. Responsibility is more prospective, proactive, focused on future actions.
And trust is the bedrock, the foundation everything else relies on.
Absolutely. Plus the importance of balancing both perspective, the backward look and the forward look, and having really clear roles and expectations defined by those codes.
And for you, the listener, thinking about practical steps, the chapter suggests actions like actively working to clarify roles and expectations in your own situations, work, family, community groups.
Yeah, promoting transparency, open communication helps build that trust, and consciously trying to foster that culture of trust.
Also setting up fair ways to, track things and ensure responsibilities are actually met, adaptable system.
Right, and encouraging that sense of shared responsibility where people support each other, act as those reminders, perhaps, while still taking ownership of their individual parts.
So putting it all together from this deep dive into Chapter 15, accountability, responsibility, trust, they're not just dry concepts. They're deeply woven into how we manage energy, how we interact, guided by these codes.
And they constantly need our awareness, our active participation.
Yeah.
Which leads to a final thought maybe for you, the listener, to consider.
Yeah.
Think about one area in your life. Could be work, could be personal. Where could getting a bit clearer on accountability and responsibility, maybe even adopting one of those reminder or guardian stances, carefully, where could that lead to, better outcomes? Or maybe stronger relationships?
That's a great question to ponder. Where could applying these ideas make a tangible difference?
Exactly. Something to mull over.
Definitely food for thought. Keep exploring these connections in your own context. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.